bit of a broken record here. For people who are listening online, we're here for the last reading of The Religion of Man by Rabindranath Tagore. We finished the book last week up until chapter 15, so it's a 15-chapter book. Today we will read the two appendices, the first being the Baul singers of Bengal, and then the dialogue, a Socratic dialogue between Einstein and Tagore that occurred in the late 1920s on the different unifying themes between science, poetry, and the universe. So, and especially creativity, which we're about to see in about an hour. So I'll shut up about that. Like usual, we'll just do one reader for each section. Who wants to kick it off?
So, the following account of the Bauls in northern India has been given in the Viz Bharati Quarterly by my friend and fellow worker, Professor Kshiti Mohun Sen of San Tinikanatan, to whom I am grateful for having kindly allowed me to reproduce what he has written in the appendix. Baul means madcap, from Bayu, in its sense of nerve current, and has become the appellation of a set of people who do not conform to established social usage. This derivation is supported by the following verse of Narahari. That is why, brother, I became a madcap Baul. No master I obey, nor injunctions, canons, or custom. Now no man-made distinctions have any hold on me, and I revel only in the gladness of my own welling love. In love, there is no separation, but commingling as always. So I rejoice in song and dance with each and all. These lines also introduce us to the main tenets of the cult. The freedom, however, that the Bauls seek from all forms of outward compulsion goes even further. For among such are recognized as well the compulsions exerted by our desires and antipathies. Therefore, according to this cult, in order to gain real freedom, one has first to die to the life of the world while still in the flesh, for only then can one be rid of all extraneous claims. Those of the Bauls who have Islamic leanings call such death and life, fana, a term used by the Sufis to denote union with the Supreme Being. True love, according to the Bauls, is incompatible with any kind of compulsion. Unless the bonds of necessity are overcome, liberation is out of the question. Love represents the wealth of life, which is in excess of needs. From hard, practical politics, touching our earth to the nebulous regions of abstract metaphysics, everywhere India expressed the power of her genius. Everywhere India expressed the power of her genius equally well. And yet none of these, neither severely nor collectively.
Severally, like a few or many, or all together.
Yeah. So, and yet none of these, neither severally nor collectively, constituted her specific genius. None showed the full height to which she could raise herself. None compassed the veritable amplitude of her innermost reality. It is when we come to the domain of the spirit, of God realization, that we find the real nature and stature and genius of the Indian people. It is here that India lives and moves, and as in her own home of truth. The Baul cult is followed by householders as well as homeless wanderers, neither of whom acknowledge class or caste, special deities, temples, or sacred places. Though they congregate on the occasion of religious festivals, mainly of the Vaishnavas, held in special centers, they never enter any temple. They do not set up any images of divinities or religious symbols in their own places of worship or mystic realization. True, they sometimes maintain with care and reverence spots sacred to some esteemed master of devotee, but they perform no worship there. Devotees from the lowest strata of the Hindu and Muslim communities are welcome into the ranks. Hence, the Bauls are looked down upon by both. It is possible that their own contempt for temples had its origin in the denial of admittance therein to their low-class brethren. What need, say they, have we of other temples? Is not this body of ours the temple where the Supreme Spirit has his abode? The human body, despised by most other religions, is thus for them the holy of holies, wherein the divine is intimately enshrined as the man of the heart. And in this wise is the dignity of man upheld by them. Kabir, Nanak, Ravidas, Dadu, and his followers have always called man's body the temple of God, the microcosm in which the cosmic abode of all-pervading Supreme Being is represented. Kabir says, "In this body is the garden of paradise. Herein are comprised the seven seas and the myriad stars. Here is the Creator manifest." Dadu says, "This body is my scripture. Herein the All-Merciful has written for me his message." Rajab says, "Within the devotee is the paper on which the scriptures are written in letters of life, but few care to read them. They turn a deaf ear to the message of the heart." Most Indian sects adopt some distinct way of keeping the hair of head and face as a sign of their sect or order. Therefore, so as to avoid being dragged into any such distinctions, the Bauls allow hair and beard and mustache to grow freely. Thus do they remain simple, they say. The similar practice of the sheikhs in this matter is to be noted. Neither do the Bauls believe the lack of clothing or bareness of body conduce to religious merit. According to them, the whole body should be kept decently covered. Hence their long robe, for which, if they cannot afford a new piece of cloth, they gather rags and make it of patches. In this, they are different from the ascetic sannyasins, but resemble rather the Buddhist monks. The Bauls do not believe in aloofness from or renunciation of any person or thing. Their central idea is yoga, attachment to and communion with the divine and its manifestations as a means of realization. We fail to recognize the temple of God in the bodily life of man, they explain, because its lamp is not a light. The true vision must be attained in which this temple will become manifest in each and every human body, whereupon mutual communion and worship will spontaneously arise. Truth cannot be communicated to those on whom you look down. You must be able to see the divine light that shines within them, for it is your own lack of vision that makes all seem dark. Kabir says the same thing. In every abode the light doth shine. It is you who are blind that cannot see. When by dint of looking and looking, you at length can discern the veils of this world will be torn asunder. It is because the devotee is not in communion that he says the goal is far away. Many such similarities are to be observed between the sayings of the Bauls and those of the Upper Indian devotees of the Middle Ages. But unlike the case of the followers of the latter, the Bauls did not become crystallized into any particular order of religious organization. So in the Bauls of Bengal, there is to be found a freedom of independence of mind and spirit that resists all attempt of definition. Their songs are unique in courage and felicity of expression, but under modern conditions, they are becoming extinct, or at best, holding on external features bereft of their original speciality. It would be a great pity if no record of their achievements should be kept before their culture is lost to this world. Though the Bauls count amongst their following a variety of sects and castes, both Hindu and Muslim, chiefly coming from the lower social ranks, they refuse to give any other account of themselves to the questioner than that they are Bauls. They acknowledge none of their social or religious formalities, but delight in the ever-changing play of life, which cannot be expressed in mere words, but of which something may be captured in song, through the ineffable medium of rhyme and tune.
Hey, just a quick question here for Quan. The Bauls so far, I know whenever he's brought this up throughout the book, I had sort of the sense that this was a petering out, if not already distinct, group or sect. But is he implying here that it still exists, or is it gone and there's just stories of the Bauls?
Oh no, it still exists, but in a very informal manner. As Ryan read maybe 10 minutes ago, most of the Baul people are from the lower caste. They don't make a distinction between being Muslim or being Hindu. Right. Maybe there are even some Christians. So it's rather a way, of course, those people are not intellectuals, but they have an existential religion. Okay, you can feel that Tagore admires them. Okay, because they embody a kind of natural religion which is centered on the celebration of life and of a spontaneous, playful mindset, if you want. Beyond the rituals, beyond the labels, and etc. But they still exist nowadays, and okay. It's nothing rigid. It's very open to everyone. It's rather, as he wrote, associated with lower caste. But I would say that here we have a specific example of the genius of India, that even if you're poor or downtrodden, you still have the capacity to be open to the eternal, if you want.
Okay.
And Quan, do you mind maybe elaborating when you say the spontaneous joy of life? What do you mean by
that? Their religion is natural. Okay, being alive is religious for them. Okay, there is no complicated theology, there's no elaborated rituals, and there's no complicated philosophy. So simply being alive, having friends, singing, that's the core of their religion. You remember an old movie with Patrick Swayze, I think, in Calcutta? That's the Baul. Okay, if you remember that movie, it's more than 20 years ago, if not 25 years ago.
So is it the actual pleasure that they seek, or is it, what is it exactly, like that they
No, it's simply being. Okay, they reach to the core of religion by celebrating the fact that they are human beings, that they exist, they enjoy life and consciousness. Like Tagore, I rather admire them in the sense that they reach to the core of religion without complicated theology or philosophy or rituals. Okay, because the eternal witness, okay, the eternal life, that is the being. Okay, and for an intellectual like me, I need to read the philosophy and theology and all kind of complicated things to get at the same existential being. And once again, we feel that Tagore admires them because Tagore was also a kind of intellectual, and he was aware that those simple people were capable to reach to that foundational being spontaneously.
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Cool. Brian, you want to keep?
Yeah.
Oh, you have another thought, or
No, it's still kind of funny, not fuzzy, sorry. When you say to reach that the same being either through the spontaneous act of just of being I mean, or through the intellectual pursuit, the end goal itself is kind of you state that the end goal is the same, but the two routes are different. But I'm still having a hard time understanding how the end goal can be the same in both cases.
I would like to quote Jesus. Okay, Jesus said in, I don't remember where in the Bible, he said, "Look at those birds in the fields. They don't toy, but they are happy," and so on. Okay, so the ball is a little bit like that quote by Jesus, if you want, being that those birds in the fields don't make complicated philosophies, they don't build cities and so on, but they are glorious by simply being alive and enjoying their existence. Okay, so that's natural religion, direct religion, if you want.
Just to be clear, is that the quote? I think Keats has that actually as the inscription to one of his odes. They toil not, neither do they spin. Is that it?
Yeah, exactly. I don't remember exactly the quote, but I think you understood me.
Yeah.
That's the by Jesus saying that the birds, they don't toy, but they are glorious in their simple being. Okay, and that quote by Jesus would say that it reflects the philosophy, or philosophy is not a good word, the natural religions of the Bauls.
Right. I have one thought just to that, Brian, what you were saying, and I think we've talked about this before. Well, Quan has talked about this. I mean, let's say meditation, the idea of presence, right? Of being present in the moment. I mean, I know what it is because I know that often I'm not present, right? So I know that to be present, I sort of had to tune into whatever I'm actually doing and kind of get out of my head, or, you know, you're doing different things that distract you, but doing the thing while being present, doing it is quite the challenge, right? It's and to be able to always do that, I mean, I don't even know if is that a thing. I think it is, but to always be present in whatever you're doing, there's definitely a religious and sacred quality of that, right? And it takes work. It's not
Yeah. And do you think, just to continue what Dave was saying, do you think, is it, Quan, is it the presence of mind in the act and whatever we're doing at this moment, or is it the joy that we get from just, I mean, being present?
Yes.
Is it a question of being able to enjoy, or is it a question of being present?
It's a question of being present. Okay, that's a deeper layer of our reality than the mind. And once again, I repeat the fact that obviously Tagore admires them because being an intellectual, it's not easy for him to get to that state naturally. Okay, he has to read many philosophy books. He has to practice meditation to reach to the same spontaneous being. Okay, that's why he mentioned them so often in his book.
Cool. So should I continue or there's more questions?
I think it's probably good to continue. And we'll once you're finished the appendix, we can flesh it out a little bit more as a dialogue or
Okay.
quintologue or something.
So their songs are passed on from master to disciple. The latter, when competent, adding others of his own. But as already mentioned, they are never recorded in a book form. The replies to questions are usually given by singing appropriate selections from their songs. If asked the reasons why, they say, "We are like birds. We do not walk on our legs, but we fly with our wings." There was a Brahmin of Bikrampur known as Shaku Tagore, who was the disciple of a Baul of the Namasudra caste. I counted one of the lowest, and hence has lost his place in his own community. When admonished to be careful about what he uttered so as to avoid popular odium, he answered with the song, "Let them relieve their minds by saying what they will. I pursue my own simple way, fearing none at all. The mango seed will continue to produce mango trees, no jambolans. This seed of mine will produce the real me. All glory to my master." Love being the main principle according to the Bauls, a Vaishnava once asked a Baul devotee whether he was aware of the different kinds of love as classified in the Vaishnava scriptures. "What should an illiterate ignoramus like me know of the scriptures?" was the reply. The Vaishnava then offered to read and explain the text, which he proceeded to do, while the Baul listened with such patience as he could muster. When asked for his opinion after the reading was over, he sang, "A goldsmith, methinks, has come into the flower garden. He would appraise the lotus, forsooth, by rubbing it on his touchstone." Recruits from the higher castes are rare amongst the Bauls. When any such do happen to come, they are reduced to the level of the rest. Are there lower planks of a boat of any lesser importance than the upper, say they? Once in Vikrampur, I was seated on the river bank side of a Baul. "Father," I asked him, "why is it that you keep no historical record of yourselves for the use of posterity?" "We follow the Sahaj way," he replied, "and so leave no trace behind us." The tide had then ebbed, and there was but little water in the riverbed. Only a few boatmen were to be seen pushing their boats along the mud. The Baul continued, "Do the boats that sail over the flooded river leave any mark? What should these boatmen of the muddy track, urged on by their need, know of the Sahaj way? The true endeavor is to keep oneself simply afloat in the stream of devotion that flows through the lives of devotees, to mingle one's own devotion with theirs. There are many classes of men amongst the Bauls, but they are all Bauls. They have no other achievement or history. All the streams that fall into the Ganges become the Ganges. So must we lose ourselves in the common stream, else will it cease to be living." On another Baul, being asked why they did not follow the scriptures, "Are we dogs," he replied, "that we should lick up the leaves of others? Brave men rejoice in the output of their own energy. They create their own festivals. These cowards who have not the power to rejoice in themselves, have to rely on what others have left. Afraid lest the world should lack festivals in the future, they save up the scraps left over by their predecessors for later use. They are content with glorifying their forefathers because they know not how to create for themselves. If you would know that man, simple must be your endeavor. To the region of the simple must you fare. Pursuers of the path of man's own handiwork, who follow the crowd, gleaning their false leavenings, what news can they get of the real? It is hardly to be wondered at that people who thinks thus should have no use for history. We have already noticed that, like all the followers of the simple way, the Bauls have no faith in specially sacred spots or places of pilgrimage, but that they nevertheless congregate on the occasion of religious festivals. If asked why, the Baul says, we would be within hail of the other boatmen to hear their calls, that we may make sure our boat rightly floats on the Sahaj stream. Not what men have said or done in the past, but the living human touch is what they find helpful. Here is a song giving their ideas about pilgrimage. I would not go, my heart, to Mecca or Medina, for behold, I ever abide by the side of my friend. Mad would I become had I dwelt afar, not knowing him. There is no worship in mosque or temple or special holy day. At every step, I have my Mecca and Kashi, sacred in every moment. If a Baul is asked the age of his cult, whether it becomes before or after this one or that, he says, only the artificial religions of the world are limited by time. Our Sahaj religion is timeless. It has neither beginning nor end. It is of all time. The religion of the Upanishads and Puranas, even that of the Vedas, is, according to them, artificial. The followers of the Sahaj cult believe only in living religious experience. Truth, according to them, has two aspects, inert and living. Confined to itself, truth has no value for man. It becomes priceless when embodied in a living personality. The conversation of the inert into living truth by the devotee, they compare to the conversion into milk by the cow of its fodder, or the conversion by the tree of dead matter into fruit. He who has this power of making truth living is the guru or master. Such gurus they hold in special reverence, for the eternal and all-pervading truth can only be brought to man's door by passing through his life. The Bauls say the emptiness of time and space is required for a playground. That is why God has preserved an emptiness in the heart of man. For the sake of his own play of love, for the sake of his own play of love, for the sake of his own play of love. Yeah. Our wise and learned ones were content with finding in Brahma the tat. So literally that, the ultimate substance. The Bauls, not being pandits, do not profess to understand all this fuss about thatness. They want a person. So their God is the man of the heart, sometimes simply the man. This man of the heart is ever and anon lost in the turmoil of things. Whilst he is revealed within, No worldly pleasures can give satisfaction. Their sole anxiety is the finding of this man. The Baul sings, "Ah, where am I to find him, the man of my heart? Alas, since I lost him, I wander in search of him, through lands near and far." The agony of separation from him cannot be mitigated from them by learning or philosophy. Oh, these words and words. Oh, these words and words, my mind with none of them, the supreme man it must and shall discover. So long as him I do not see, these mists slake not my thirst. Mad am I. For lack of that man, I madly run about. For his sake the world I've left. For Bisha naught else will serve. This Bisha was a Buin Mali by caste, disciple of Bala, the Kaivarta. This cult of the Supreme Man is only to be found in the Vedas, a hidden way, in the Purusha Sukta. It is more freely expressed by the Upper Indian devotees of the Middle Ages. It is all in all with the Bauls. The God whom these illiterate outcasts seek so simply and naturally in their lives is obscured by the accredited religious leaders and philosophical systems and terminology, in priestcraft and ceremonial, in institutions and temples. Not satisfied with the avatars, incarnation of God, mentioned in the scriptures, the Baul sings, "As we look on every creature, we find each to be his avatar. What can you teach us of his ways? In every new play, he wondrously revels." And Kabir also tells us, "All see the Eternal One, but only the devotee in his solitude recognizes him." A friend of mine was once much impressed by the reply of a Baul who was asked why his wardrobe was not tinted with aesthetic ochre. Can the color show outside unless the inside is first tinctured? Can the fruit attain ripe sweetness by the painting of its skin? This aversion of the Baul from outward marks of distinction is also shared by the Upper Indian devotees, as I have elsewhere noticed. The age-long controversy regarding Dvaita, dualism, and Advaita, monism, is readily solved by these wayfarers on the path of love. Love is the simple serving. Love the natural communion, so believe the Bauls. Ever two and ever one, of this the name of love, say they. In love, oneness is achieved without any loss of respective selfhood. The same need exists for the reconcilement of the antagonism between the outer call of the material world and the inner call of the spiritual world. As for the realization of the mutual love of the individual and the Supreme Self, the God who is love, say the Bauls, can alone serve to turn the currents of the within and the without in one and the same direction. Kabir says, if we say he is only within, then the whole universe is shammed. If we say he is only without, then that is false. He whose feet rest alike on the sentiment and on the inert fills the gap between the inner and the outer world. The interrelations of man's body and the universe have to be realized by the spiritual endeavor. Such endeavor is called Kaya Sadhan, realization through the body. one process in the Kaya Sadhan, can we, maybe you should stop here and just try to reflect and ask questions. Yeah, I have a quick question about, because the thing is that, so this intermingling of the inner and outer world, in the sense that there's no distinction, or there's no two separate natures that are the premise of the material and the spiritual world. Like how does he envision such intermingling? Because if we look, like, for example, if we take, I mean, if you look at the Platonic text, or the Christian, the Christian narrative, there is a clear duality, or a clear distinction represented by these two worlds, let's say, right? Or,
well, that's sort of been the theme of much of the book that he's been getting at, without ever making it, I think, explicit. But it's sort of always been there, is the question of reconciling the inner universe and the outer universe, or the finite and the infinite, and these different barriers that block us as cultures, or as individuals, or as different, particular zeitgeists from various parts of the world or in time, from harmonizing our personal identities with God and God's mind and God's creation around us. And he's been, spending a lot of time examining different cultural groups and looking for the parts that, or the aspects that bring about the living spirit, and those that cripple it, that set it awry. A lot of the things that tend to set us awry is the falling into formalism, or the tendency to focus on ritual, or rules, or logic of the systemized form of various religions, and lose the creative essence, the love that brought a lot of the systems into being in the first place. And then from there, when you have only that rigidity, and you lose the access of loving your fellow man, loving God, you tend to also have problems of vice, of ego, the egotistical side taking over, elitism, a fixation on materialism tends to be the consequence. And, we've looked at, again, various philosophical traditions and groups that have all fallen down that same path. So he's always like looking at, well, what is this harmony? What allows for that harmonization of the one and the many that Plato also gets at? And I think that if you don't look at the formal aspects, like if you don't get caught on the formalisms of Plato or the formalisms of Christianity, but look at the essence of, like, the aspects where you're taught to love in a true way, with both faith and action, which you get at in the Platonic dialogues. That's why Socrates died for his principles, right? He wasn't just theorizing in an ivory tower talking about like how you should be a good person. He was actually like living it. And the same thing, obviously, for Christ, obviously, is, he walked the walk and encouraged others to do the same. So I think if you do that, then you can get a sense of like what he's at least interested in, Tagore, when he's talking about resolving the dissonance between ourselves and the universe as a whole, or the thing that he likes in these different, or admires in these various cultural groups that he's focusing on.
Okay, yeah, great, well said. I'll continue.
Sure.
So so Kabir says, if we say he is only within, then the whole universe is sham. If we say he is only without, then that is false. I think I already read that, no?
Yeah, I'll read it again. It's good.
Okay. If we say he is only without, then that is false. He whose feet rest alike on the sentiment and on the inert fills the gap between the inner and the outer world. The interrelations of man's body and the universe have to be realized by spiritual endeavor. Such endeavor is called Kaya Sadhan, realization through the body. One process in the Kaya Sadhan of the Bauls is known as Urdha Srota, the elevation of the current. Waters flow downwards according to the ordinary physical law. But with the advent of life, the process is reversed. When the living seed sprouts, the juices are drawn upwards. And on the elevation that such flow can attain depends the height of the tree. It is the same in the life of man. His desires ordinarily flow downward towards animality. The endeavor of the expanding spirit is to turn the current upwards towards the light. The currents of jiva, animal life, must be converted into the current of Shiva, God life. They form a center around the ego. They must be raised by the force of love. Says Dadu's daughter, Nanimata, my life is the lamp afloat on the stream. To what bourne shall it take me? How is the divine to conquer the carnal, the downward current to be upward turned? As when the wick is lighted, the oil doth upward flow. So simply is destroyed the thirst of the body. The Yoga Vasista tells us, uncleansed desires bind to the world, purified desires give liberation. References to this reversal of current are also to be found in the Atharva Veda. This reversal is otherwise considered by Indian devotees as the conversion of the stula in the shukshma. So stula is gross and shukshma is fine. The Baul sings, love is my golden touch. It turns desire into service. Earth seeks to become heaven, man to become God. Another aspect of the idea of reversal has been put thus by Rabindranath Tagore in his Broken Ties. If I keep going in the same direction along which he comes to me, then I shall be going further and further away from him.
I guess by virtue of what you've just read, this is not Tagore's writing. This is somebody else writing that they put in the appendix. Okay, I thought we were reading Tagore. Ha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, go on.
As Rabindranath Tagore said in his Broken Ties, if I keep going in the same direction along which he comes to me, then I shall be going further and further away from him. If I proceed in the opposite direction, then only can we meet. He loves form, so he is continually descending towards form. We cannot live by form alone, so we must ascend towards his formlessness. He is free, so his play is within bounds, within bonds. We are bound, so we find our joy in freedom. All our sorrow is because we cannot understand this. He who sings proceeds from his joy to the tune. He who hears from the tune to joy. One comes from freedom into bondage, the other goes from bondage into freedom. Only thus can they have their communion. He sings and we hear. He ties the bonds as he sings to us. We unite them as we listen to him. This idea also occurs in our devotees of the Middle Ages. The Sahaj folk endeavor to seek the bliss of divine union only for its own sake. Mundane desires are therefore accounted the chief obstacles in the way. But for getting rid of them, the wise guru, according to the Bauls, does not advise renunciation of the good things of the world, but the opening of the door to the higher self. Thus guided, says Kabir, I close not my eyes, stop not my ears, nor torment my body. But every path I then traverse becomes a path of pilgrimage. Whatever work I engage in becomes service. This simple consummation is the best. The simple way has led its votaries easily and naturally to their living conception of humanity. Rajab says, all the world is the Veda, all creations the Quran. Why read paper scriptures, O Rajab? Gather ever fresh wisdom from the universe. The eternal wisdom shines within the conquerors of the millions of humanity. The Baul sings, the simple has its 30 million strings whose mingled symphony ever sounds. Take all the creatures of the world into yourself. Drown yourself in the eternal music. I conclude with a few more examples of Baul songs, esoteric and otherwise, from amongst many others of equal interest. By Gangaram, the Namasudra, realize how finite and unbounded are one. As you breathe in and out, of all ages, then you will count the moments. In every moment, find the ages. The drop in the ocean in the drop. If your endeavor be but sahaj, beyond argument and cogitation, you will taste the precious quintessence. Blinded are you by over much journeying from born to born. O Gangaram, be simple. Then alone will vanish all your doubts. By Bisha, the disciple of Bala. The simple man was in the paradise of my heart. Alas, how and when did I lose him? That now no peace I know at home or abroad. By meditation and telling of beads, in worship and travel and travail, the quest goes on forever. But unless the simple man comes of himself, fruitless is it all. For he yields not to forgetfulness of striving. Visha's heart has understood right well that by his own simple way alone is its store unlocked. Listen, O brother man, declares Shandidad. Yeah. The truth of man is the highest of truth. There is no other truth above it.
Okay. Well, that was the most in-depth analysis of some of the Baul literature that I had ever encountered. What do you guys think so far of the gist of what was said? Or any questions or anything like that regarding the idea of the
For me, the
paradox of the unbounded and the finite? That really caught me. But yeah, go on, Brian.
Yeah, it's just there's this always the striving to unite the two contradictions. So, for example, when he says God is freedom and man is a structure, or man lives within bounds, and there is this yearning from both ends to I mean, that God seeks, I think there's a place where he says God seeks the structure that man is bound to, and man seeks the freedom that God is. So it's always this intermingling between these two worlds and trying to find and trying to find harmony between both.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Well, I think that there is a apparent contradiction between the finite and the infinite, because the solution is built in the infinite. Once you're in the infinite will necessarily include the finite. So that duality is an appearance when you're in the finite, but when you uplift yourself in the infinite, because the infinite is englobing or encompassing the finite, the contradiction just disappear.
I guess the problem becomes then how do we think about the infinite in a fruitful way, because there are destructive approaches to the infinite. Like I was thinking about a bit about the I forget which Plato dialogue it was on the issue of pleasure. Might have been the Philebus, and how
the Philebus.
yeah, which was dealing with the question of how do we judge good and evil, and the idea of pleasure came up as a standard of judging, and pain as being, you know, evil, and that which gives us pleasure is good. But then Plato makes the point, well, there's infinite types of pleasure you can get. That doesn't really get you at an idea. Your mind doesn't wrap itself around the infinite in that sense. But in terms of, he starts an investigation into virtues, which there are a finite amount of, you know, we talk about the 4 cardinal virtues, but there aren't infinite in terms of justice, temperance, wisdom, what have you. Missing one.
Exactly. Exactly. When you have the entities, if I may use such a word, the entities of the upper world are necessarily infinite. Okay, infinite in the sense that there is no limit, or there's no limits to that reality. Okay, in the animal kingdom, you can eat too much cake, of course, but in the divine kingdom, you cannot have too much justice. So there's an asymmetry, and that asymmetry allows us to reconcile the two when our soul is in the upper kingdom.
But just to ask you a question, Kwan. So, and I feel that the way they put it in this text, there's a section where he was saying the only thing you have to do is make sure that the current, he uses, I think, the word current, passes, instead of passing from your head to your toes, or your head to the animal part of it has to, you just have to invert the flow of the current. And but technically, what does that mean?
Okay, because the head is also in the animal kingdom. Okay, let's not forget that the intellect is what Plato called Acacia 2, the shadows 2. So the animal kingdoms, you have the sense, the intellect, and conventional truth, meaning the dominant culture of your society. That's the animal kingdom. The kingdom, or episteme for Plato, that would be to go to being, goodness, and truth. Okay, and you cannot have too much beauty, you cannot have too much goodness, and you cannot have too much truth. Okay, so a very down-to-earth way to explain what is infinite is that an infinite reality can expand infinitely, precisely, because you cannot have too much of what is called infinite. But you can have much of a cake, but in the infinite, the finite means at the root core that in that lower dimension, you can have too much of something. But in the upper dimension, beauty, goodness, and truth, you cannot have too much of something. And when in the upper reality, you will encompass the lower reality. Someone who is in beauty, goodness, and truth, that person will never have a problem like eating too much spaghetti, or eating too much or working too much or drinking too much alcohol. Okay, because the idea is to invite you to live in the upper kingdom and not to have your center in the upper kingdom. Because as long as you have a body, you would eat cake and spaghetti. That's not a problem. But if your soul is in the upper kingdom, the lower kingdom will never cause any problem. Or rather, if your center is in the upper kingdom, okay, because you still live in the lower kingdom when you have a body. But when your center is in the upper kingdom, the lower one will never cause problem for you.
That's good. I was thinking a little bit about that famous, we often see this painting by Raphael of Plato disputing with Aristotle from the Stanza della Signatura. And, you have the famous image of Plato pointing upward and holding the Timaeus, and Aristotle holding his Nicomachean Ethics and pointing downwards in a very rigid position, whereas Plato's in a state of motion. And obviously there's a certain metaphor contained in that that's pretty profound. But that Plato is getting the mind to go beyond the material world into the higher domain of heavens when looking for causality, whereas Aristotle is trying to always find ways of binding the mind to the material mechanistic domain, the sort of practical domain. And what he was saying about the question of the fluids, when devoid of life, gravity is the dominant force pulling fluid downward, and you think about that for the elements, all but fire tends to be subservient to gravity. But he's like, but when you have life, all of a sudden in a tree, the seed that grows into a plant or a tree, all of a sudden you have fluids disobeying gravity and going upward, right? It's the only time everywhere. That's very interesting. But then fire as well, like wherever there is life, there is warmth. When we die, our bodies get cold. And there's a certain quality of heat contained in life as well. And fire as a plasma is always sort of striving upward into the heavens, right? There's a certain directionality. So when we are, I like that metaphor that was weaved together by the author of this text, that whenever we are subservient to our or controlled by our animalistic or more base material side, we're being pulled down as the fluid would without life. But when we have that higher love, that higher yearning for truth, beauty, and goodness, we're being pulled upward, with that metaphor of like the tree and the fluid in the tree. That was kind of nice.
Yeah, the elevation of the current.
I have a thought. I was thinking of Kuza and the way he talks about the finite and the infinite, because it's always a question of if you break them apart completely, you lose sight of how they meet. But from a Kuzan standpoint, I guess you could say that the finite is just a special case of the infinite, right? Each individual may be mortal and discrete, but it's part of a continuous process called humanity, right? The species itself is continuous. And in the same way, I think we could say that matter is a special is a particular case. The material is a particular case of the immaterial. And the problem becomes when you get these nominalizations or formalizations, as Matt, you were saying, where we try and take these things that are special cases or unique expressions, bounded of something unbounded, and we try and just treat those as their own thing, rather than seeing that they're simply expressions, right, of these higher forms. They're bounded by these higher forms, which are unbounded in their possibility. But in any moment, you're going to get a discrete expression of that if we're talking about the real world, because the real world, the physical world, is always bounded at any one moment. But the principles organizing it are not.
Absolutely. And it reminds me too of what we were reading a few months ago with Max Planck's philosophy of physics, where Max Planck, he makes the point in the fourth section of that work, which is very much like what we've been reading with Tagore and I think it's what we're going to see a lot of in the next appendix on the Einstein-Tagore dialogue, on the question of spirit, and how the true scientist, Max Planck was saying, is one who recognizes that ultimately the formal math, the formal constants that we use, and he was this sort of creator, the discoverer of the Planck constant, but that these constants themselves are not really constant. They are platforms towards jumping into higher new constants without ever expecting to reach an end. And the corruption in science in the 20th century that he and Einstein were fighting against was the tendency to want to fix and crystallize these constants into these absolute structures beyond which you couldn't, your mind would not be permitted to leave, like the speed of light being infinite, or the Planck constant being infinite and immutable as a length. And it's like, it was never a length. These were just useful, the E equals MC square idea. These were useful ideas that opened up new vistas, but it was always meant to open up more. But he had the idea that all is ultimately spirit, that matter is but one particular part of a much broader domain. And he was citing, I think, St. Paul in that as well, which is very interesting for a scientist to do, at least according to modern scientists who have been like swept away by nihilism and materialism. But yeah, he was much more Kuza-esque. That being said, it's 9:12. I would like to read the Platonic dialogue between Tagore and Einstein tonight, and I think if we start really soon, we could do that. Are you guys up for it?
Sure.